In 2019, when Xbox revealed the new console, the Xbox Series X, one game was revealed alongside that. Ninja Theory's Senua Saga, Hellblade II, and it's been a long journey from reveal to the release right now, but I have played Hellblade 2. In fact, I have played Hellblade 2 twice, and I have some thoughts. So let's get into it. Yes, I know it has been a very long time since I've put out a video. So for those of you who don't remember who I am, what's going on? Randall Thor19, the man with the million. You know I had to come back to talk about my most anticipated game of 2024. In fact, my most anticipated game from Xbox ever since that glorious reveal on the Game Awards stage all the way back in 2019 when the world was a different place. But I have so many things to talk about with Hellblade 2, so if you guys can do me a huge favor, hit that like button and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Maybe this will get me revitalized into making more content. Now, first off, I want to thank Ninja Theory and Xbox for sending over the review code, and if you're wary of spoilers, and you should be, because this game is all about the story, the presentation, what happens when you see certain things. Like, there are moments in this game that I am thankful for that I did not get spoiled, so be wary. But know that I will not spoil anything in this review. I will briefly talk about the story in a vague way, and all the video content that you will see will be strictly from Chapter 1, as I wouldn't want to spoil any locations or any significant moments that do happen throughout the game. So I guess the big question everybody's going to have for me is, Rand, did Hellblade 2 live up to your expectations? And the short answer to that question is yes, it absolutely did, although maybe not fully. So yes and no, and we're going to get into the longer explanation now. I don't know what the title is, but I'm going to be leaning towards Hellblade 2 being a cinematic masterpiece, question mark, right? Is that actually something they were able to achieve? Because I certainly feel this was the goal of Hellblade 2, not only continuing Senua's journey, but also bridging the gap between gameplay and cinematics, essentially having people wonder, where does the game begin and the movie end? And in that regard, Ninja Theory has achieved that goal, because the thing that stands out the most in my mind about this is the cinematic presentation of Hellblade 2, and I'll say it right from the very beginning, there can be no doubt about it. Hellblade 2 is the most immersive cinematic game I have ever played. The bar has been set for everyone else that is coming behind them, that if you go along this path, this is the new standard. Now, I'm sure throughout the day, other people will drop their reviews, and one of the criticisms of the game is that it's too much like Hellblade 1, that it's too much of a walking sim and it hasn't evolved over time, which I find to be a ridiculous sentiment, considering nobody really has problems when sequels to games are essentially the same thing, but prettier. Nobody really complained that Spider-Man 2 was essentially the same game as the two previous Spider-Man. You get my point. But even though I do have a couple issues with Hellblade 2, I do have to point out that what Ninja Theory set to accomplish, they absolutely nailed in every regard. Because Unreal Engine 5 and the things they're doing with this, how the game looks, and you're going to have debates about what is the best looking console game of all time, Hellblade 2 is slotted here. Like, when I was playing through this, I thought, I am seeing the promise of next generation finally reveal itself on the Xbox Series X. And that's through the graphics, that's through the animations, and that's through the landscapes. Iceland has never looked better. There are moments when you're walking through this game and you come out of a dark tunnel into the sunshine, and my jaw is just on the floor. I can't believe how they were able to craft such a realistic looking game. It's still, even when I think about it, it sort of blows my mind. But it's not just the graphics and the landscapes, it's the animations. Whether it's the facial animations that Senua is using when they do a close-up on her, so you can really feel all those emotions that Senua's going through. Whether it's fear, anger, happiness, sadness, you see Senua, Melissa Juergens, putting on the performance of a lifetime in this, and you're like, holy crap, that could be real. To the animations of the combat and the way the camera moves back and forth, or how a scene will seamlessly transition from gameplay to a cutscene back to gameplay without any noticeable decline in quality whatsoever. And those fights, oh boy, the animations in those, even though the combat in the game isn't too much changed from the original, the kill animations and fight scenes within this game, combined with everything else I've mentioned, is why Hellblade 2 is the most immersive cinematic game I've ever played. And I know a bunch of you are probably wondering about the performance on the Xbox Series X. Yes, it runs at 30 frames per second, and yes, I have always been one to say I prefer games at 60 FPS or 100 FPS, so did this affect my enjoyment of the game? Absolutely not, and honestly, I never thought about the frame rate after the first 5 minutes. It's probably the best 30 frames game I've ever played on console. I didn't notice any drops or anything like that, and I never gave a second thought to the frame rate once I started playing it. Now, for those of you who are wondering how long the game is, it's roughly about 7 to 8 hours, depending on the difficulty you select, and if you're actually looking out for hidden paths to find the collectibles that are strewn across the journey. But when I think about Hellblade 2, I'm also thinking about Hellblade 1 and how that game made me feel, all the emotions that I did when I played it in 2017, and what that game was like. A indie developer creating what is a indie AAA on the budget of a AA with 20 developers. And the thing that I most loved, the journey that Senua went through, the story that they were telling, it really spoke to me, and I was enraptured from beginning to the end. The best thing about Hellblade 1 was the story and the resolution, and you can honestly say that the combat was an afterthought. It was serviceable, but it wasn't amazing. So in my eyes, one of the things that I needed to see was an improvement in combat. So when I think about the things that I love to the stuff that I didn't really care for in this game, it may come as a surprise not only to you guys, but to myself, that on my second playthrough, because I finished the game, and I was like, all right, damn, this was so good. Let me sleep on it, let me replay it, and see how I feel a second time. The thing I most liked about Hellblade 2 ended up being the combat, which is something I didn't think I would be saying, because I'm a story guy. I love walking simulators. I love reading fantasy science fiction novels. I love great characters that are put in dubious positions that have to make tough calls. I love it when I'm being told a great story. I feel all those emotions, man. So going into this, I thought, yes, the story is going to be the pinnacle for me. So I'm pretty stunned sitting here telling you guys that the combat's probably my favorite part of the game outside of how immersive the game is in itself. I mean, there are literally no button prompts whatsoever. When you get in combat for the first time, they don't tell you that you have to press X or Y to swing your sword, or right bumper to block or parry, or A to dodge. You just sort of gotta know it yourself. It's basically a movie played out in game form, and the combat really falls in line with that. All of Senua's slashes, her heavy attacks, all that are essentially copied from the first game, but the movie-like quality, the cinematic presentation the game has, when you parry an attack and suddenly that enemy in front of you is turned around and you press X to attack them, you'll do like an instant kill animation. And there are so many of those throughout the game. You'll knock people down on the ground and stab them, or you'll cut their throat, or you'll take a knife or a hatchet and slam it in their face. There's so many different combinations of these instant kill animations that I was constantly impressed, even to within my second playthrough, where it kept the combat fresh, because I was seeing new things, despite the fact that a lot of the actual gameplay animations were the same. And the combat itself, I think, really shines because of the 1v1 nature, because it's kind of a push and pull, and each one of the enemies that you fight will attack you differently. So it's not a, like, one size beats all. Man, the combat is so brutal. It's so unforgiving. It really feels like you're in the battle yourself. There was a section later on in the game that was so adrenaline pumping. I was on the edge of my seat. My hands were gripping the controller tight. There were some insane camera movements, kill animations, stuff that was going on in this game. I couldn't believe it. I honestly believe it's one of the best fight sequences I've ever seen in a game. And I even felt like that the second time I played through that sequence. So I love the combat. I love how brutal it is. I love how sometimes Senua is scared and that gets into the fighting itself. She'll be knocked down, the camera will shake. You feel desperate because the enemy is about to come in for that kill stroke and you get away, right? You can feel her desperation. Oh man, the combat is just really cool. Being able to parry those hits at the last second to kind of open up those instant kill opportunities. I can't praise the combat enough. It's the best thing about this game, and it's the surprising thing about this game because I expected it to be better, but I didn't expect it to be this damn good. Now, I mentioned before that Hellblade 2 is a walking sim, as people will refer to it, that the story and the emotions and the journey that Senua goes through is the focal point of the game, right? If you don't like stories in your games, if you don't like long cutscenes in your games, this game's not going to be for you. But the story that they're telling in this game, I have to be honest, isn't as good as the story in Hellblade 1. But that's not to say the story in this game isn't great, because it is. And there are some things that you learn about Senua and the companions that she meets and how those companions affect Senua and how she views herself and all those great things I wish I could talk to you guys about and the themes of the game, but I won't because I want you to experience it. But the way the story is set up is that Senua is on a journey essentially to stop the slavery that is going on. Because if you remember in Hellblade 1, it was the Northmen that came to her lands and killed her lover, Dillion, to take the slaves from her village overseas. And this whole game is about stopping that. And during her journey, you'll encounter companions, some of them friendly, some of them not. There will be giants. I won't say what happens with those. But the story is pretty damn good. It's just not as good as Hellblade 1. And maybe if I do a spoiler cast, I can give my reasons why. But even on my second playthrough, I was still really transfixed by everything that was going on. Because after you beat the game the first time, you can change the narrator. And I'm sure most of you know Senua hears voices in her head. The audio presentation in this game is absolutely fantastic. The music fits completely. That core emotional journey that Senua does go on in this didn't match up to the first game. And I know I'm presenting it like a bad thing, but it's not. I'm just surprised within myself that I enjoyed the combat more than I did the story in this game. And that leads us probably to my least enjoyed aspect of Hellblade 2, and that is the puzzles. You know, a lot of people talk about Hellblade and how it basically is you walk for a little bit and you hear some stories, you have the Furies speak to you, you solve a puzzle, you get into a fight, rinse and repeat. And Hellblade 2 really doesn't navigate too far away from that formula. You are going to be walking a lot. You will be hearing the voices in your head all the time, which can feel very oppressive. And the puzzles make a return, although not in the same quantity as the first game. The first one had rune matching where you had to find runes spread out in the environment. I do feel that Ninja Theory learned their lessons about this. They are signposted a lot better, so they're easier to solve. I just don't think people like to solve them. But it wasn't the rune matching that was a problem with me. There are also two new puzzle types that are introduced throughout the game. Mostly have to do with perspective shifting Obviously, it's also tied into her journey because the way she sees the world is different than everybody else. So the puzzles do work overall in the sense of like it fits into Senua's journey. It just felt like the new puzzles that they introduced, for lack of a better word, weren't very interesting. And they really did feel more like time wasters than anything else. There was nothing where I'd be walking around and I had to like engage my brain to figure out a complex puzzle. It really just felt like the developers were sort of stopping my progress. I was like, no, you're gonna stay in here, you're gonna kind of fumble around a little bit, and we don't want you moving on. I am not a fan of what those puzzles were sort of doing, and that is probably my biggest gripe with Hellblade 2 at this point in time. Was just, I like the rune puzzles in this one. I think there's only a few of them. I did not care for the other ones. I sort of wish they weren't in the game, but I understand why they are, because it all dovetails into Senua and how she sees the world. It just, as a person sitting there with the headphones on playing the game, it just didn't really jive with me, and that sort of kind of dragged down the experience overall. So like I said, the game lived up to my expectations, but also it sort of let it down in another area. I still love the game enough that I played through it twice. The combat and the story carry this experience all the way to the finish line. The cinematic nature, I've never played anything like this. You've never played anything like this. The transitions from gameplay to cinematic and back and forth is so seamless, you have to wonder how this technology is going to be used in the future. Like, where are we at the point now where games are becoming movies and movies could be games, or however you want to say it? Hellblade 2 is blurring that line. It's just, the puzzles, I don't know what you do here with them. They just aren't really engaging enough. They fit into the story because of how Senua is. It's just, I wish they were better. They improved the combat more than I ever thought they could. I didn't expect the story to hit the emotional highs as the first game did, and it didn't, but that's no fault of the story they're telling here because it's incredibly important. But I like this game. I dare say I love it. It's my game of the year so far, and I'm going to give it a 9. You know, when I originally finished it the first time, I was about an 8.5. I played through it a second time with the new narrators, and I thought, hey, am I going to be bored by this a second time so closely to the first playthrough? But I wasn't. I played it all again. Hearing the new narration, giving you a different perspective on some of the things that happened within the game itself, made me appreciate it even more and the things that Ninja Theory were going for. So I bumped my score up to a 9, but I don't think I'd go past that. So that is my review of Senua Saga Hellblade 2. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to watch the video. I know it's been a long time since my last video. Hopefully this can get the creative juices flowing again. And let me know what you think after you play Hellblade 2, because you can pretty much play it in an hour after this video is posted. Thank you guys. Love you. And I'll see you in the next video. Later.